Darling, could you pass the sugar? Oh, you're so uncouth. That's so pedestrian.
It's a beautiful spring day in Canada. I love theme parties, and today we're throwing Mom to be Ruby, a beautiful and very posh English tea party. Hi everyone, I'm Karen Ahmed. Welcome back to Kravings Food Adventures. Now, I tried the famous Battenberg cake when I was about 18 years old and we went over to England. The memory stayed with me many years later. One of my friends made the same cake for the hit show Recipe to Riches. This was a show that I was on the following year. Now, I have these beautiful memories of the Battenberg cake. If you've never had it, you really should try it. This is a checkered board pattern of almond sponge cake. It's sandwiched together with some delicious apricot jam and it's covered in marzipan. It's truly delectable. This cake has been on my bucket list for a very long time, and finally I have mastered the art of the Battenberg. Now, it looks very complicated. It is a very technical cake, but if you break it down, it's really quite simple to execute. The cake was named in honor of the marriage of Princess Victoria, a granddaughter to Queen Victoria, to Prince Louis of Battenberg in 1884. Now, Battenberg is the name of a town in Germany. I prepared this cake early this morning and now I'm all ready for my guests to arrive. Let me show you how easy it was to make it. I'm going to start with the butter and I'm going to measure out 175 grams. Now, this is just over 6 ounces. This really needs to be soft at room temperature. Now, room temperature really depends on where you live. In my cold kitchen in Canada, my butter can be fairly firm even after 48 hours. I like to sit it in the warmest parts of my kitchen, often close to a heat source. I'm also going to measure out 175 grams of sugar. In England, they use caster sugar for this recipe. Now, the closest thing I could find is superfine sugar. It's important for these ingredients to be light in this super airy cake. If you can't find either, just process your regular sugar for about 30 to 40 seconds in your food processor. Next, I'm going to prep my 18 by 18 centimeter cake square pan. This is roughly just a little bit over 5 inches. This size works best with this recipe. Trust me, I've tried it. I'm going to be dividing this pan in half and it's going to hold 2 different colors of batter. But first, I need to butter my pan really well. Now, just take your time to get that butter all over the pan and into all the little crevices. This is actually what's going to hold the parchment paper in place, so it's really important to do this step well. I've measured and cut a piece of parchment paper to fit my pan. Now, this needs to be slightly under the width of the pan on one side and more than double on the other side. Now, you need to account for the middle divider, the sides, and you're going to need a little extra to use as a handle when you pull the cakes out. Take this parchment paper and fold it over in half. Now, I've made myself a little cardboard divider. Now, this is really simple. I've literally just cut a piece out of my egg carton and I've just trimmed it to fit the middle. I'm going to cover it with tin foil just to protect it, and I'm going to insert this in the middle and I'm going to get this as straight as possible. Now, I'm going to gently place the fold of the parchment paper over the divider. Now, here's where I wish I had octopus arms, but I don't. So what I'm going to use is just a plain clip. I'm going to secure the parchment paper to the divider and I'm going to use my hands to ease the rest of the paper in. Now, make sure to get right in there and get into those edges because you want to make sure that you have nice and sharp edges on your cake as well. Now, you can get very specific pans made specifically for Battenberg cakes. They have 4 separate compartments, but I'm going to show you later why I actually prefer to use just a regular pan. Now, this cake is made with the simplest of honest ingredients: butter, sugar, flour, vanilla, baking powder, and ground almonds. Now we're going to cream the butter. Now, this is a very crucial step, especially if your butter is not super soft like mine. I've had an instance where I didn't cream the butter enough and the cake literally sank on me. It was a miserable day, I tell ya. Keep scraping the butter from the bottom of the bowl and keep beating this till it's nice and soft. Now when you note that your butter is nice and soft, you're going to add that superfine sugar that we measured out. This is 175 grams and I'm going to add it in. Now what's going to happen is the sugar is going to act as an abrasive and it's really going to fluff out that butter. The air pockets trapped in this butter is what's going to make this cake super light. Now let's add the eggs. My eggs are at room temperature. I've got 3 eggs and it's really important to make sure that your eggs are at room temperature because you really don't want cold eggs hitting that butter. What's going to happen is that butter is just going to go right back to being hard again. I'm going to add 3 eggs one at a time. And with each addition, I'm just going to add a tablespoon of flour. Now the flour is going to help the batter not look like it's curdled. Now the flour I'm using is self-raising flour. This is another very important ingredient to getting a fluffy cake. And I've measured 175 grams of this. Now look how gorgeous this batter is starting to look. I'm going to add the rest of the flour 1 tablespoon at a time. And I'm going to make sure to scrape the bowl at intervals. I'm also going to add 1 teaspoon of baking powder and 2 tablespoons of ground almonds. It is an almond sponge cake after all. Finally, I'm going to add a half teaspoon of vanilla essence. Now, many bakers of this prestigious Battenberg cake like to add almond extract, but I'm going to be using almond extract in the marzipan later. So I really don't want to overpower the cake with that very strong almond taste. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use vanilla extract. And I'm going to mix everything together and keep it aside. Now everything's ready and I'm going to divide the dough. Now you can just eyeball this if you want to, but I prefer to use 2 bowls and I like to divide this equally using an ice cream scoop. Now when I was doing this, I was actually thinking about the time I had to serve ice cream to my boys and they would look over to each other's bowls to make sure that one didn't get just a little bit more than the other. You can also weigh the bowls if you like to make sure that they're equal. Now there are a lot of Battenberg varieties out there with funky colors, but today I'm keeping this very traditional. 1/2 is going to be natural and 1/2 is going to get the tiniest of drops of pink food coloring. If you don't want to use pink food coloring, you can also use a very tiny amount of beets. I've used grated beets before in a beetroot buttercream icing and it turned out really good. You can check out that recipe on my channel. When you add the color, take some extra time to scrape the bottom of the bowl to make sure that you're not left with any natural color streaks. Every bit of this batter needs to be pink. Once this is ready, take the clip off and using 2 spoons carefully, oops, I was trying to avoid that, add your batter to the pan and spread it out. Now if you think this was tricky to do, imagine trying to get the batter into the tiny slots of a Battenberg pan. This is why I prefer to use this pan. Place this in a preheated oven at 350 degrees for 40 minutes. While the cake is baking, I'm going to work on the marzipan. Yes, you may be surprised to know that I'm not using store-bought marzipan. Marzipan is so easy to make. I don't know why people buy a product that is so expensive when you can just make it yourself at home. To make a simple marzipan, you need 200 grams of ground almonds, and please make sure to get the kind that are skinned and ground. You can also grind this in a food processor if you can't find ground almonds. You will need double the quantity of icing sugar. In my food processor, I'm going to add the ground almonds together with the icing sugar. Now, processing this again gives me a much finer blend. The icing sugar also helps to dry out the almonds by absorbing all of the oil. I'm also going to add 2 egg whites one at a time and 1/2 teaspoon of almond extract. And I'm going to process everything till I get a really nice supple dough. Now this quantity of marzipan may be a little bit more than you need, but I always like to have extra in case I need it. Place the marzipan in a microwave-safe plate, cover with cling wrap and just zap it in the microwave for 10 seconds 3 times. Then remove it and allow it to cool. Now once the cake is done, I like to turn the oven off and I like to let the cake sit there for another 5 to 10 minutes before I remove it to cool. The cakes are now finally cool and it's time to take them out. I'm really happy with them. They haven't sunk in the middle and the colors are gorgeous. I noticed that even after my meticulous measuring, the pink part has risen more. This is either because of the extra whipping when I added the food color, or maybe there was just simply more batter in that bowl. Either way, it's a pretty easy fix for me. I've measured the shorter cake in height, and I want my strip to be the same width. You can trim these freehand, but the use of a ruler really makes it a lot easier. Transfer the strips safely to a piece of parchment paper or a flat plate. These ends are my treat. Honestly, this cake is so delicious by itself. It really reminds me of my mom's very simple butter cake. Use the same measurement for the pink cake, but since it's a bit taller, I'm just going to use the ruler and trim off the excess. Now I'm going to lay down a silicone mat and an oversized piece of parchment paper over it. In this recipe, trust me, parchment paper is your friend. For this, you can also use a wax paper or butter paper as they refer to it in some other countries. Lay the marzipan down and roll it till it's about a 1/4 centimeter thick or even a little bit thinner than that. I like to lay the cake over it just to see how wide I'm going to need it, and I'm going to trim off some of the excess. I'm also going to use the marzipan that I cut off to make my rectangle a little bit longer so that I can easily wrap the whole cake. I'm going to give it one last little trim, and any of that unused marzipan is going into a Ziploc bag for future use. I'm also going to trim off the edges of the marzipan so when I fold it over, it's nice and neat. And now for the glue. I have about 1/2 cup of apricot jam that I've just warmed up, and I'm going to brush a few teaspoons all over the marzipan. Add 2 logs of the cake, one natural color and one pink, and add the jam between them so they stick together. Also add the jam to the sides facing up and lay down the final 2 cake logs in the opposite colors, adding jam in between. Now I'm going to flip it over just so you can see this better. Using the support of the parchment paper, I'm going to gently fold over one side and finish with the other side. With the help of the parchment paper, I'm going to smooth down the edges and pinch the corners. Once this is done and wrapped firmly, I like to wrap it in cling film for at least 1 hour, so that I know the Battenberg holds its shape. When you're ready to serve, slice off the jagged edges. Now this is another perk for the baker. Look at the colors of this cake, it's perfect. Slice off the other edge as well, and keep a damp towel handy and make sure to wipe your knife in between cuts. This will ensure that the slices come out nice and clean. Using a very sharp knife, you can either cut straight down or use a slight sawing motion. This cake is the perfect cake to serve at any royal gathering. The Brits love their Battenberg, and so do I, darling. Thank you so much for joining me on Cravings Food Adventures. I really hope you enjoyed this recipe for the Battenberg that I have been dying to make for a very, very long time. Make sure to share my channel with your family and friends. I upload new videos every week, and I have recipes from all over the world that I'm sure you're going to want to try in your own kitchen. Also, make sure to hit the little bell icon that'll make sure that you're notified every time I upload a new video. Also, follow me on all my social channels. There's so much behind the scenes footage that I upload there every day. Follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, Twitter, and even Snapchat. Until I see you next time, bye, darlings. Shut it.